Hello and welcome back to the Architectury Multiplatform modding series for Minecraft. And after we've added armor in the last episode, today we start with some more advanced topics regarding blocks, starting with directional blocks. Directional blocks are the blocks that you place down and then they have a certain orientation, like a piston, for example, or a furnace or a chest or any other of the blocks that have their appearance change depending on how you place them and how you stand when you place them. And with that, we also start to get a little bit into block states, even though we don't go deep inside of this yet, because some of the things are already done from the game itself when regards of directional blocks, but we still need to do some stuff of our own. So today we'll be adding two blocks. The first one is a Ruby crate, and the second one is a Ruby furnace block. Both of those are for now only blocks that appear in the game and have their orientation in a specific way when placed. So the crate's opening will always face the player when he places it down, and the furnace just behaves like the regular furnace in the game, so it only faces it to the sides and never to the top or bottom. Now, the first thing we need is create classes for our blocks, because right now, for the blocks we've added so far, we always created a new block. And this works fine if you just want a basic block that has no properties at all and just appears in the game. But since we want to do some more advanced things, we need to create a class for our block. And inside of this class, we need to put some parameters and methods so that the directional things work. So let's start with our Ruby crate block. And for this, we create a new class. And now this class needs to extend a directional block. Now, as you can see here, there are some things missing because directional block provides us with some things that we need for the game to work. And the first thing is the codec. I'm not entirely sure what this codec does, but it's required in the new versions of the game. And for this, we do the following. We first define our map codec for the Ruby crate block, and the game provides us with a simple codec method. And then we put in the constructor, which we will create shortly, into the simple codec method, and then we create a codec, and that we can then return in this codec method down here. Now, the constructor is missing, so let's create our protected Ruby crate block constructor, and here we have our properties. And this is the default constructor, similar to every other block, so we can simply pass these properties down to our super constructor, and with that we have created a Ruby crate block. But while this class would already have the directional property, it is not yet registered to the game. And this is the next thing we need to do in this constructor. So we call register default state. And in here we need to provide a block state. And for this, we call this .getStateDefinition.any, which gives us any state definition. And then we set the value of our facing to direction.north. And this means that in a default state, when this block is placed without any state-specific metadata, it will always face north. So right now, the game already knows about this facing block state, but it would not have any effect yet. Because if we place the block down now, the facing value is not set. And for this, we need the getStateForPlacement method. And in this method, we now need to specify from this block place context. This is essentially when the player right-clicks with the block in a hand on the ground. This context is populated with values specific to the player's location and orientation. And we now need to transform this into a block state that is then applied to this block. And for this, we first take our default state, get this default block state, and then we need to set the value to context.getNearestLookingDirection.getOpposite. So the context.getNearestLookingDirection is the axis in which the player looks. So for example, north or up or down. And we need to get the opposite because we want the front of the block to face us when we place it down and not face away from us. And for this, we need to essentially flip the block once around its axis. And this is what we do with the get opposite. And that's everything we need to have the block placed. Now, there are two additional methods that you typically want to also add, and those are the rotate and the mirror methods, because those are, while they are not required, they are useful if you use the commands that manipulate blocks and move them and stuff like that, so that the block state is also rotated and mirrored correctly with those methods. The last thing is we need to create a block state definition with the create block state definition method, and here we have a builder, and to this builder we need to add a facing property so that the game knows about it. And that's everything we need to do in our block class for our Ruby create block. What I'm now going to do is simply copy this class, because for our Ruby furnace block it's pretty much identical for now, but later we will add more things, and with that we need to modify these classes in different ways, so it's just preparation for the future. Now, the main difference, or pretty much the only difference we need to do here, is in our get state for placement, because with this we could have the furnace facing up or down or to the sides, and we don't want to do that. So we, instead of get nearest looking direction, we call get horizontal direction, which is only the north, south, east, west component of your direction. So if you look up, it would get the north, south, east, west direction you're looking closest into instead. That's everything we need to do in these custom block classes for now. So let's head to a regular blocks class and create our two registry suppliers for our blocks. A static registry supplier for block and call it Ruby create. And then we also create one for our Ruby furnace. And then we need to register those two blocks similar to the other blocks. So Ruby underscore create equals register block. And then Ruby underscore create. And then in the lambda notation, now the difference, we don't call new block, but we call new Ruby create block. And again, we pass in our base properties, and we also want to require the correct tools for jobs and strength, even though I'm not going to add those tag properties right now. But yeah, it's essentially similar to any other block. The only difference is that we now create a Ruby create block instead of a regular block. And we also do the same thing for our Ruby furnace. Here we call the Ruby furnace block. And similar to any other block, we also need to head to our items class and create two registry suppliers here for items for our blocks. So a Ruby registry supplier item for our Ruby create and one for our Ruby furnace. And then again, we also need to initialize those two with the same method we used for the other blocks. So we create a new BlockItems from our Ruby create block and our Ruby furnace block, add them to the creative mode tab, and that's it. That's everything we need to do in Java for our directional blocks. And now we need to add the resources. So let's start with the language file and add our names for our Ruby create and our Ruby furnace. And then we need our resources. So for the resources, we start with the textures. I've prepared the textures for our block. So we head to our block folder here and then copy the textures into this folder. Now so we have a front for the crate, we have a side for the crate, and the side will be all the other sides that are not the front. And for the furnace, we have a top, which is essentially a slightly modified version of the Ruby block. We have a side texture, and we have two front textures, one in an unlit state and one in a lit state. The one with the lit state we won't use for now. That will become relevant later when we add actual functionality to our furnace block so that it can smelt items. But for now, we're only going to use the front texture. That's the texture part. Then we need our items definition, because that's similar to all the other blocks we've added so far. And those are identical to the other blocks. So we have a Minecraft model type, and then we specify it's the block for the Ruby crate model. That's the items definition. Next, we're going to do the models definition. And here we have the first slightly different thing to the regular blocks, because for the regular blocks, for example, we specified cube all, and then all is this texture. All sides have this texture. And with those two, we have a different setup, because the parent is now block orientable. This means that the block can have different textures on different sides. And the sides we use here are front, side, and top. So the front texture is the side that is later facing us. The side texture are all the three other sides that are facing away from us, when talking about a furnace, for example. And the top texture is the top and the bottom side. And for a furnace, we specify the front for front, the side for side, and the top for a top. For the crate, we also specify the side for a top, because we want the top and bottom to have the same texture as the sides. And now we need to do the most important file for this to work, and this is our Blockstates files. So until now, we only specified the default variant with this model, and this now gets a lot more complicated with the new blocks, because they have different block states now, and for this we need to modify the models so that they appear correctly in the world. So let's check out the furnace first. As you can see now, we have 4 variants. The first variant is for the east facing, then we have the north facing, the south facing, and the west facing model. And each of those variants has the model definition, which just references the model we just created for a furnace, and Y rotation. This is the rotation of this model applied when this variant is present in the world. So for a north-facing block, as north is the default block state, we don't want any rotation on our model. If we face south, we want to rotate the block around 180 degrees, to the east 90, and to the west 270 degrees. All around the y-axis, because we always want to have the front at one of the sides. For the crate, we have 2 additional facing variants, and one of those is down. And for this, we need to rotate the model around the x-axis around 90 degrees, and we have the facing up variant, also the x-axis rotation, but 270 degrees, so that the top faces up. And that's everything for the rotatable blocks. So let's jump into the game and see if it works. So welcome to the game. Let's open our inventory and go to our tab and collect our Ruby crate and our Ruby furnace blocks. And as you can see, in the inventory alone, you have different textures on the different sides. But now let's place them down and see if it works. So let's place down the crate first, and as you can see, the opening of the crate faces us. And if we turn around, or the other directions, the opening always faces us. And if we place it in this way, the opening faces the top, and if we go over to this tree and place it here, you can see it faces to the bottom. So for this block, our orientation has worked. Let's do the same with the furnace. As you can see, the furnace orients always towards us when placed. But if we try to place it from above, you can see we still have the top on top and have the front to one of the sides. And the same if we try to place it from below, you can see the front always faces to one of the sides. And with that, we have successfully created blocks that orient in relation to how we place them. And in the next episode, we are going to add basic block entities, which then later allow us to add inventories, for example, to those blocks and to store items in our crate or smelt items in our furnace. See you then. Goodbye.